when Blood Flowers was finished, it was considered to be the third part of the other two being Pornography and Disintegration, and it wasn't something we thought about immediately to do concerts, but Robert had the idea to play. It would be nice to play a concert where you just play an album straight through.
Robert had been talking about filming the Blood Flowers album as a show because he wanted to document the lights and the production and everything, and also this particular lineup of the group. And the idea came out of that.
Robert originally came up with the idea to play all three albums. I think he was originally inspired. He went to see David Bowie, and he played one of his albums in its entirety. I think that sort of was the catalyst for Robert to think maybe we should do the same, but on a bigger scale.
This idea of just doing an album worked perfectly. I thought it was just, I've seen Bowie a few times, and that's the best I've seen him on stage for years and years. I thought if we could do that with 3 albums, I mean, it's a pretty ambitious undertaking. And very shortly after that, in fact, during the summer festivals themselves, I suggested to the others that we try and do these 3 albums, one after the other, back to back. Everyone was a little bit incredulous at first.
Robert said, let's do it. I mean, that apart from that, there's not, I don't know, I mean, it's difficult. We don't really discuss things and think, shall we do it or shan't we? I mean, you know, Robert had decided that it would be good, I suppose, as a sort of, I don't know, final chapter in that part of the band's history, to bring that to some kind of conclusion. I mean, I'm sure, you know, the next album will have some sounds that will be very similar to that, and there'll be certain aspects of it which, of course, are the Cure. I mean, but I think that, yeah, mainly it was just something that was just happening.
Where we were going to make this film was pretty crucial, actually. There were a number of realistic contenders. I wanted to film it in Europe, because not just because we made the show film in America, but I felt this trilogy had more of a particularly a Northern European feel, just the imagery that was involved. And I thought the city was important. I thought where we did it would have an effect on how we did it. And originally, right at the very start, we thought London, but then I thought we're choosing London because it's easy. It's logistically easy, and we can, you know, it's just the whole thing will fall into place. Then we toyed with some kind of slightly more extreme places. Like in Russia, we've never played in Russia. We were going to go there and maybe do it there. We thought Czechoslovakia, because Prague, fantastic city, just the right atmosphere. And then I thought Berlin, because we've been there a lot over the years. And particularly from the early days, I really used to like playing in Berlin. There's just something, I mean, it's slightly different now, but the feel of the city, there's a certain something about Berlin which is still there. I mean, it's much more evident when the wall was up. I mean, it was much more unpleasant in most ways. But the kind of the sense of black and whiteness about it, and the sort of and it's I suppose it's almost a cliche, but the light in Berlin and the sort of the nightlife and the whole kind of like vibe of the city, I just thought suited doing something like this. If we'd done it somewhere like Barcelona, another one of my favourite cities, but completely the wrong choice for doing this set of albums. Probably good for the Kiss Me album, Barcelona, but. So yeah, it was, you know, there was a short list. I think Prague, Berlin, and we were thinking about Moscow. Those are the 3 choices. And I just thought Berlin, it just felt right. I didn't get to see much of Berlin while we were there. I mean, just out the hotel window, you know, and the drive to the venue. But even that, you get a sense of place, you know. When we were arriving there, you're driving through the streets, you're kind of seeing a city, you know. It all helps. I mean, it might be very subliminal, but a huge difference when you tour enough. You it doesn't. You know, people say, "Well, you don't really know where you are. The hotels are all the same," but you do, unless you don't kind of want to. Of course, you know where you are. You know, if you're in Phoenix and not New York, you know, it's like it may well be the same chain of hotels, but it's pretty different once you step out the door. And it has an effect on me where we are. I mean, through the years, if we're playing outdoors in the summer somewhere, I find it quite difficult to really feel miserable. Not that I want to, but I thought it was pretty important that when we walked on stage to do pornography, we hadn't just been in a tapas bar. It made a difference. We needed to have that kind of like quite heavy atmosphere around us. The sense of history that's in Berlin and all that's gone on. It's just there. You can't pretend it isn't.
We played the same set in Belgium just before we did the 2 nights in Berlin, and that's really when I realised it was a really good project to do, and then that made us we could go into Berlin knowing that this was going to be a good show, and that's a really nice way to walk on stage and just know that it works. And because I was quite worried that it could be just feel as long as it was, I suppose, but it really worked, and the audience loved it, and that's as much as you can ask for, I suppose. Yeah.
For me, the idea of doing these 3 albums was, I suppose, always primarily it was to show that this lineup of The Cure. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, this lineup of The Cure is the best lineup that I've played in. I mean, there are other lineups that I've enjoyed in other ways, and I think I've been better at certain aspects of what we do. But I think this lineup is the most dynamic lineup that we've ever had. It's the most it can be the most subtle lineup and also the most powerful lineup. It's and I think the band that did Pornography, the trio that did me, Simon and Lowell, that went out and played the Pornography songs first time round. I mean, I've got tapes of that tour, not many. We weren't that good. It was an incredibly intense experience for us on stage and much smaller venues. And at the time, it was pretty depressing, actually. I found it really, really difficult. I mean, at the end of we didn't even get to America on the Pornography tour because the band disintegrated in Europe, and me and Simon didn't talk for well over a year. It was pretty fraught. And I suppose when we came to start rehearsing the Pornography album this time round, I was worried about how the two of us might respond, like looking across at each other. Like a song like Short Term Effect we haven't played since 1982, and that was very weird. Actually, being on stage and playing that felt kind of strange.
It's a bit strange when you come, because we came off stage in between each gap in between the albums. You sort of like found yourself almost falling back into the mood of things that you probably thought you'd forgotten about. But, definitely when we came off after Pornography, you tend to remember times when you're in the studio recording that and also being on tour at that time. And it's a bit weird to sort of like force your mind to think, well, next we're going in to do Disintegration, which, even though probably listening to Disintegration might not be a wonderfully happy record, but it's actually quite a happy time recording it. So it's, you're going through a whole myriad of moods, like on stage and sort of backstage during the gaps. So it was quite a weird gamut of emotions.
Probably me and Simon, I mean, we didn't really talk about how we were going to approach it too much because then it becomes too contrived. But there was a sense when we went on stage, it was this Cure playing those songs. It wasn't me and Simon trying to recreate what it was like. I mean, if we had recreated what it was like, we wouldn't have come back on for Disintegration. We would have had to wait 7 years before coming back on and doing it.
When we did the Pornography tour, it did change my personality. I changed into somebody I didn't like. I changed into a really nasty piece of work, and it was. But they can't display it on songs. It was of a time, and it was like experiment with things that, by their very nature, change people's personality. But hopefully now you can play Pornography songs and almost touch upon the feelings of it without getting showered in it, without indulging yourself too much in it. I mean, bloody kill you if one tried to act like a 20-year-old again. But no, it's just quite frightening, like looking back, and also quite a cold feeling looking back on things like that. But at the same time, you do have to realise you're only playing a song. You're not actually living that lifestyle anymore.
since the Trilogy shows, I've been asked why we all look so serious on stage. You can't approach an album like Pornography without being in a certain space emotionally. You certainly can't go on and laugh your way through songs like 100 Years. When I first joined the group and we first started to play 100 Years, I was almost in tears during that song. When you get involved in playing the songs and the albums, they, especially when you play them in the running order that they are, they sort of take over, and the intensity and emotion just, manifests itself in the music, and it's difficult to break out of it.
Blood Flowers, I love that album, but I love that album, but I love it because for me I can play it so much easier than I can play the other ones. I mean, Boris playing on Disintegration, and Lol, they're fantastic drum parts and stuff. But I suppose in that sense I have to think that little bit more of, what about the part that I'm playing. It's not something that I'm totally naturally playing because, obviously I didn't play on the original ones. But I suppose Disintegration I like because I really do like the drum parts on that and the songs. Filming it for 2 nights, the first night I was definitely more nervous than the second, and I think that in some ways when you listen back to the recordings, audio-wise, you can think that although it may sound slightly too nervous, it's got a lot of energy to it, and even though that may sound not quite as settled as the second night because you've played it once or whatever, when you marry it with a picture, it's got a bit more conviction, I suppose, on stage that, not that I don't always want to get it right, but I suppose sometimes you try too hard. I suppose looking at my facial expressions, sometimes you see that. But, you just want to get it so it sounds as natural as possible, which obviously if we'd have played a tour, then they would sound very different. And then you had filmed us at the end of that. There's definitely songs that sort of take a while to settle in. But I think overall they sound really good, actually.
Playing songs you haven't played for 20 years, it's... I suppose I personally found that easier to play songs like that because I'd say a lot of the audience hadn't seen it. There's probably a few old codgers in there like us. But, because no one has got something to compare it to except what's been recorded in the studio, they can't say, well, last year they did that better. So even if we completely ballsed it up, it wouldn't matter too much because we could say, well, that's the way it's meant to be now. It's a jazz version of it, whatever.
After the first night, there was a huge sigh of relief in the dressing room after the show. And we did consciously approach the second night as, okay, we've done it. Let's go and have a good time. I think especially Pornography was much better on the second night. It's not a matter of us not knowing the songs. We knew the songs. We knew we could play them. But whenever we play for a live recording, there's pressure. And then when you're being filmed by 12 cameras, that doubles. And for something like this, it's just a matter of professional pride, and we just wanted to get the best performances. We also wanted to get the notes right, which sometimes are two completely different things. You can go on and play a note-perfect show, and it will be sterile and boring. But then you can go on and play what you might think was a great performance, and it just be completely full of wrong notes and mistakes. But and sometimes those two balance each other out. Because you don't just want to hear a live version of the albums. Sometimes a wrong note isn't necessarily a wrong note; it's just a different note. Especially if you take my approach.
People like Perry, he's sort of so pretty relaxed bloke most of the time anyway, and he doesn't let pressure like that get to him. But like some people like Jason and myself, it worries us because you think, well, you know, if you make a mistake, it goes down for posterity. So that adds pressure to it because, like, you know, if you think you're going to make a mistake in a certain song at a certain place, 9 times out of 10 you will. And so, you know, all these sort of funny things run through your head, and it's like such a waste of time to, you know, to worry about things like that. But it just happens, and you know. But other people, you know, just I suppose it's how you focus your mind. Like Perry just said, well, you know, if it happens, it happens, and not really worry about it. And so in his case, it doesn't. But Jason and I, as I said, you know, we fret about it, and we can actually pinpoint a certain point in the set where Jason doesn't make a mistake. But you know, I can pinpoint a part in the set where I can say, oh, I'll fluff that up, and I will because I've been worrying about it. Where, you know, in rehearsals you can just sort of say, well, that's all right, no one's watching, and play it fine. It's sort of law, I suppose.
But it's this weird thing. I am really relaxed before I go on stage, and it's just how it is. And Simon has been playing longer than I have, and can really play his parts in his sleep. You know, he's always nervous. But having said that, Simon doesn't remember that on the night of the Berlin show, I was actually really nervous. And because I remember actually going up to Simon and saying to him, I actually feel nervous. And he's like, no, you never get nervous. But I was. And I suppose just that, as I was saying earlier, just something felt different about it and gave it an edge. But that's a good thing. It really is. I think the band should have some nerves and go on stage feeling a bit tense. It really, it shows, it definitely comes across, and the audience feel it.
I think I'm lucky in some respects in that I don't suffer from nerves in the same way as the others do. I'm the least nervy with regards to live performance. It doesn't kind of bother. For me, it's such a surreal experience anyway. I mean, I know it always sounds really stupid when I say it in interviews, but it's not. There's a part of it that is just so alien to me, getting on stage and singing in front of people. But that's probably why I like it so much, because it's just such a strange feeling. I don't get nervous about it because I figure that there's not anything to get nervous about. Even if I forget the words, it's like, so I forget the words, you know. It's so I do remember most of it. I think my overriding impression of the shows in Berlin was that everyone was, looking back, what I didn't understand was everyone was very aware of the cameras. And I actually forgot about the fact that we were being filmed. I think in certain songs, I was desperate not to go wrong, because I kind of drilled it into myself, like, if you go wrong both nights, we won't have a take. And it was just that. But then, whenever we get on stage, I kind of have that in my mind, because I always think this is your one chance to play in front of these people, and I always want it to be the best thing they've ever seen. So I always approach it in that sort of way of thinking, like, this is it, it's the last thing I'll ever do. And I convince myself it's true. You know, it's like, I don't think I've ever been on stage and thought, if we get it wrong, we'll do it again tomorrow. Because all the people that are there probably won't be there tomorrow. So I always remember back to when I used to go to concerts, and when I still go to concerts, I want that band or that performer to put everything into it, because why should they wait for the London show? It's that kind of mentality that I really hate about performers.
We do have a very close relationship with our fans, and we consider their feelings and what happens to them. We try and make and do things, you know, that other bands may not consider. We try not to think about what they would want so much in terms of music, because then you start trying to second guess what's going on. But in terms of what we can do for them and how we can help them, we always try and do as much as we can.
I only know the ones that make an effort to try and meet us, and I do have to admire those people as well, because it is really hard. I only see them maybe standing in the front row and wave to them, but when you think about it, they have to, I mean, just making his way to the front row of an audience is hard enough, just once, but they do that every night, having travelled with backpacks on trains or in a car, crushed in, 6 of them in a vehicle or something, and travelling. God knows where they sleep.
it's amazing. Yeah, it is incredible. And they, you know, I remember once when in '96 on the swing tour, there was a car that followed us for miles in their car, sleeping in their car. Yeah, so it's amazing.
With the audience, you know, talking to them, it's sort of a bit weird because it would be weird not to talk to them because we see them so much, and as you say, you know, seen them in bars and sort of like, so you just get into a chat, and then it's almost like, I can't make a good analogy, but it'd be very priggish of us not to like talk to them, and it's just sort of like got to a stage now where, you know, probably know about 50% of the audience by their first name, so it's sort of a big extended party for the audience and the group. And I suppose, you know, it gets weird when you see them in the bar the night before, and they sort of make requests for the set list, and you think, hang on, we've actually sorted the set list out for tomorrow night, and it's almost like we're their personal jukebox. But you know, it's quite nice, quite funny, because then they start arguing amongst themselves. You know, one lot say, no, we don't want that one, and so you leave them. You can wander up to bed and leave them to argue amongst themselves. But it's very, you know, they're all very nice and they're all very polite. Nice bunch of people, really.
It is gratifying that we still attract a new audience each time we go out. You know, I kind of think the audience is getting younger. I never think I'm getting older. I suppose that there's the two reasons. I think one is that we have never kind of, like I said, I alluded to earlier, we never really crossed over into that. Not into like I don't know what it's called around the world, but that sort of like adult rock kind of thing where you suddenly. You leave behind, or you know what in this country is always sort of derisorily termed teenage angst. Angst is always qualified with the word teenage, so as to diminish it. I've never met anyone. I mean, my parents are in their 80s and they haven't got a clue what's going on. I've never met anyone that knows really what's going on, and I still have the same feelings of you know, the same confused emotions and thoughts as I had when I was young. I mean, I've vastly more experience and I'm different in many ways, but I don't really feel that I'm ready to leave behind what I've done, because I don't feel any different. I really don't. I enjoy the same things. I enjoy the same topics of conversation. I enjoy the same type of person. The fact is that most of those people are younger people because they're not burdened down. They haven't become cynical. I mean, that's the biggest problem, is that most people who have got to my age have usually got to my age having done something they don't really like doing, and it just wears them down, and they become kind of solidified and just old, I suppose. There is still a percentage of our audience which is, you know, as old as me, and older, some of them. Some of the ones with real stamina. Which is equally as gratifying, I think, to think there are people out there who are still young in that sense. You know, all the music we play, I think, isn't really to do with young or old. It's just to do with a state of mind. And I honestly, like I said, people who believe that as you get older, you get wiser. They need to get older because it doesn't happen.
I suppose I remember like the audience atmosphere being really good, but I mean, it's really true what I say, that I don't remember concerts because it's almost like going to the edge of a precipice and jumping off, and it's almost going to free fall. And it's not just about these concerts, it's every concert. And it's like when I go to football and see a goal, I feel the same. It just happens, and I can never remember it. It's just happened so fast. And I suppose it's just adrenaline and everything, but I never remember them. I sort of vaguely remember emotions, but any fine detail, it's just gone in the alcoholic days.
Just having tea breaks, actually, that was the strangest thing of playing, you know, that amount of time. I mean, Pornography, how long was that? 40 minutes or something? I can't remember, actually. But then having a break after that, and then the next chunk of Disintegration, and then having a break. So, although we sometimes felt that would maybe take out the momentum of the show, I think it was good, actually. So that, I enjoyed that. Like I said, I quite like the intervals.
The overriding emotion that I took away from it, or impression, was our ability as a group to perform that, and to perform it so well. Not wanting to blow our own trumpet. But to play that many songs so accurately, virtually note perfect, and with such emotion and aggression at times, whatever it took, I think it was amazing for us to be able to do that.
There was such a degree of focus because we knew it was being filmed. And that can go the other way, where the performance becomes rigid, where everyone's tightened up and concentrating on playing. But fortunately, as I said earlier, you get a few songs in, and then you do forget that it's being filmed. Just concentrate on the work. But that kind of tension is there, and of focus. Yeah. Made for good. So I'm really looking forward to hearing that. It's going to be. This is one thing that you can end a project, like you can make an album, which is a process of just making bits in small part, the way The Cure works. And by the time the album is ready to be released, you've heard the song so many times that you have to put it aside for a few months before you even hear it. I'm sure a lot of people do that, who spend that much time on the project. But this DVD I'm really looking forward to seeing, because it was just a one-off. It's with 2 nights, and by the time it ends up being there to watch, I'm going to be really looking forward to it.
I suppose that's the whole point of this trilogy, is just the I could be very grand about it, but they're moments that I've taken, just periods of my life that I suspect for most people, they're pretty kind of universal. Most of the themes that we deal with anyway are universal, which is why it translates around the world. It's why we're not a UK band. It's the sense of what we do. Always when we're doing songs, our best songs are the ones that musically you don't even need to understand what I'm singing. You kind of get what I'm singing from the combination of the sound of how I'm singing it and the music. That's when you've written a good song, you know that someone who can't speak your language is going to know what that song means. The songs on Pornography have got an edge to them, particularly on the album. But I think even in fact, a lot of the that kind of anger was recreated quite well on stage. The initial kind of feeling when we went on and did 100 Years, that really was like, it was a pretty good feeling, actually, going on and the reaction of the audience, suddenly, it's the first time in years we've gone on stage and started with something that's like bang, and that just makes you feel young. It's like being in a really young band. That's how young bands start. It shows, and then they go up and up and up. But are they on stage 3 hours later? No, they're not. I think one of the most gratifying things about this film is that hardly any of these songs have ever been filmed before. It's really hard to believe that we did the whole of the Disintegration tour in 1989 and no one filmed any of it. So it's weird. And there are key performances of certain songs. That I was determined when we were rehearsing, that I was banging on about. These are the definitive performances. 100 Years is an obvious example. Pornography is another one. I think Plain Song's really good just because of how we felt when we walked back out. We actually believed that we were back in 1989 again. It's really nice. And a lot of the Disintegration songs I think come across really well. I think Lullaby is really nice. That's one of the few that has been filmed before. And I think it's a completely different sort of version of it. It's really nice. It's much more playful. In fact, it's probably the only time in the film where there's an insight into the other side of the band, the kind of the chirpier side of the group, left in a few smiles. There are more smiles going on set. Anyone that's there at a Cure show, and even on the night, there is from moment to moment, there's a relaxing moment, and usually between songs or at the start of a song where it's some of it's almost like a release of tension. But Lullaby's got a nice bit of just interaction, and then there's a couple in Fascination Street. Fascination Street's a really good version. It's nice and punchy, a bit psychedelic. It's good reminds me of what I was writing about, New Orleans, 1987. Right? I think the Same Deep Water as You is a really beautiful version of the song. That's one of the best moments for me is seeing that, because we'd never do that song. We've probably only done it like 5 times in sort of 10 years, I should think. And the Bloodflower songs, just overall, because that was kind of the catalyst for me, I suppose, of wanting the whole thing to be done, was just to get this lineup playing the songs that this lineup had recorded, are really good. And the end section, I think through, I think the Loudest Sound is really nice. It's a really kind of like quiet moment, and then 39 into Bloodflowers is probably my favourite bit of the film at the moment. That will change when I've watched it a few more times. And I suppose that putting the 2 encore songs on at the end, which is kind of like jumping away from the trilogy thing, like putting If Only Tonight and The Kiss on the end, was, I suppose, in a way, and not only that it was a nice way to finish, because it's just a big kind of thing, The Kiss, it's turned into a really great song to play live, but it's almost, from although it doesn't lead on, because it's actually looking back as well, it was kind of leaving a question mark for me over the end. I thought ending with Bloodflowers, a bit too kind of obvious, a bit too definitive. Ending with an encore, it's like ongoing, because we came back on anyway. I mean, it's only we couldn't fit any more stuff onto the video, but it's just like it's funny that after all this time, I still even 3 hours wasn't really long enough. I could quite happily have. I suspect the viewer is probably happy that we didn't go on, but I don't know. The idea of doing another trilogy show, like I said, it's not. I don't think it's a good idea. But doing another Cure show that incorporates what we've done in this film, whether it be with other songs, but actually, I think seeing what we can do has given me a good impetus to try and better it. It isn't, well, I say it isn't going to happen again. I mean, we've been kind of talking about doing other trilogies, but I'm not sure how realistic it would be. I mean, for me, Pornography, Disintegration, Bloodflowers, they just are, for me, linked albums, because even the making of Bloodflowers, I had the other 2 albums in mind. There are other albums which there are links through most of the stuff that we've done, obviously, but they're a lot more tenuous. And I think if we were to do it again, we may run the risk of just doing something for the sake of it. I'm not sure that we would be able to kind of capture that sense of feeling that we had for these couple of shows.
I think we're done with trilogies. I certainly hope so, because like I said, I think the reflection period is over. It's time to look forward. I'd love to play Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me in its entirety, but I'm sure Robert will tell me I can play it any time I want. No, I think it's time to look forward now.
I think we've done the old in the past thing now. It was a nice way to put a full stop behind however many years it is now, as opposed to let things tail off. And it's nice to sort of finish that way, and then we can move on to the next thing, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, it is to do with the past. No getting away from that.
A band that exists for so long does run a risk of just repeating itself. It's like putting off death by repetition, and it really does need. There should be chapters and endings, and then start again, and sort of, not necessarily reinventing oneself in a desperate way, but just knowing that this ends here, and now we move on to something else. And that's why I'm really excited about actually starting work on a new album. So this will be done by the time this DVD's out. People seeing this, hopefully the new project will be well underway or even finished. Yeah.
I don't know. I know that it sounds, the songs that we've done so far are, yeah, they're dark. But they're not. Dark in the sense of it sounds heavy. I suppose. Yeah, it will sound heavy, but dark in the sense of lyrically. I don't know, because I don't know what lyrics Robert's written and stuff like that. I mean, he could put the most happy lyrics on something that I think is, a crunchy, doom-laden guitar track. But I don't know. It's yeah.
I think historically, whenever we've done anything that's sort of momentous, and has the kind of like that sense of doom and foreboding, we've always followed it with something that's really trite and usually pretty stupid, although enjoyable at the time. After Pornography, Let's Go to Bed, after Disintegration, Mixed Up. But after Bloodflowers, I don't think that it's going to continue on with that. I think this film kind of consolidated the idea for me of what The Cure do best. And I don't think I've got enough time or inclination, actually, to be bothered reacting against it. I don't sort of feel, I mean, the other times when we've done things, I've reacted against it instinctively. I haven't kind of sat down and thought, right, and now I'm going to do something populist. It's just that I felt I don't want to go, that's it, that's like the end of that particular bit, and I want to do something completely different just because it will be more enjoyable. This time, I don't feel like we've actually gone far enough down this road. I found it so good being on stage doing these songs, but I want the next album to be like the heaviest album that anyone's ever made in the history of music. That's my intention. It's I think there's threads running through the songs from Pornography, Disintegration, Bloodflowers, which we could take to extremes and do something that's really, you know, I mean, that's a pretty tall order, actually, doing something that's never been done before. But I think that I've got the idea in my head of what this group could do if we stay together and make another record. I think that there's a sound that we could make which is more to do with what we've done in this film than reacting against what we've done in this film and what we've done with Bloodflowers. I think it will be a continuation, and it will get darker, not lighter.
Okay. We're going to have to change talk after about 20 minutes, just so you know. It's on a fresh take. We happy?
So break for question 2 then.
Rolling?
The strap-on keyboard. Now there's an idea. I keep begging Robert to let me get one, but so far, no. I get to put a guitar on. Basically, they all want to be behind keyboards. You know, they'd rather get rid of those strap-on, whatever you want to call them.
Okay.
Simon, you can help me out on this one. What's the hardest song for me to play? What's the one where I'm most sticky on? Sorry, that wasn't rehearsed, that bit.
He is a really good guitarist because he's like it's understated and subtle, and it's knowing what to play. No obvious stuff, but Robert's got that. He's a good musician first, and then a really good guitarist. Was that creepy and grovelly?
I never met Sid Vicious, no.